Well, hello there. Back here, we're here with Nicola Preston from IIRP. I said it right?
Yes, you did.
Nicola works for this organization as well as another two at the moment, and she's going to tell us a bit about how she got into restorative justice.
Yes, well, yes, the International Institute for Restorative Practices is sort of a bit further down the line. I was first introduced to restorative practices when I was a serving police officer with Thames Valley Police. Charles Pollard was then the Chief Constable, and Terry O'Connell, who still works for the International Institute for Restorative Practices, came over on a Winston Churchill Fellowship with the ideas that he'd developed as a then police officer with New South Wales Police around conferencing. He introduced those ideas at a lecture that Charles attended, and so Charles came back to Thames Valley Police and said, "This is amazing.
We have to do this.
We have to do this." Yes. So I was working with two others, Andy Bird and Ewart Watson, in community safety at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And more or less overnight, we became the Restorative Justice Consultancy in Thames Valley Police. Terry stayed over and trained a number of us within the force, and also some multi-agency partners as well. So Belinda Hopkins from Education, Ray Fishbourne from Probation, Tim Newell from the prisons.
So those are all very well-known names
yeah.
around the circle of
That's
restorative justice.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And we introduced it to cautioning, but the important thing about restorative practices, which Sir Charles recognised at the time and Terry had highlighted, was that it's about working with people. So as well as cautioning, we also introduced it to our internal complaints and grievances. So we were doing it with staff within Thames Valley Police as well.
So that was cutting-edge stuff at the time, because only now people are thinking about using restorative justice to do with complaints as well in some places, in some settings,
yes,
like NHS and public services.
Yeah, and yet there was research done at the time. So this must have been early 2000. Joe Dobry, now I think it was then called the Independent Complaints Authority.
Mm-hmm.
It's gone through a number of names. But she came in and did a report on the work we were doing with complaints and grievances. And it was very positive then. So I guess these things, come back round again.
They do.
And Lawrence Kirshen, I know, has done some work more recently in terms of highlighting how...
Belinda Hopkins looking around as well with education. I was wanting to ask you about some more recent developments to do with setting standards and continuous professional development. Obviously, you're now in the International Institute for Restorative Practices. Mm-hmm. How do you view the standards that are being given by the Restorative Justice Council? Obviously, they're consulted with a wide variety of stakeholders. And also, how is that going to affect practitioners?
I think... the work that I do with the International Institute for Restorative Practices is international. They have a number of organisations around the world. So I have seen standards and accreditation develop in those different countries. And I think John Collins within the RJC now is doing a great piece of work to try and draw in practitioners to feed into that process. I was involved, in fact, when it was the Restorative Justice Consortium, when it was first set up, and we were involved with the Home Office then in setting up those best practice guidelines. So I know it's an arduous process to use that fair process to engage people, and for it to be a participative process that supports and upholds the quality of restorative justice, and that to me is the most important bit. I don't think we can compromise at all on the quality and the principles of restorative practices.
When we talk about the quality, we're talking about the quality of the service that is given to victims and offenders as well, and relatives and communities. So it's important that we get it right in the first place, and there's often very dire consequences to not doing things great in the first place. So to speak, you'll be bringing a bit of an international outlook to the rules that are being implemented here at the moment, because you draw from the work that has been done in other places before here. So although the UK is fairly advanced in terms of restorative justice, there are places where implementation has gone further, like in New Zealand, where it is mandatory for youth cases and things like that. So how do you see the UK fitting in that sort of jigsaw at the moment?
I'm not sure sort of where we're at in terms of the Restorative Justice Council, but I mean I think it's essential we have a national organisation that represents the views, because I'm also now a practising teacher and special education and needs coordinator. I'm involved in education now, and so the principles are as important across all the different contexts. You've talked about complaints and grievances. You've talked about the New Zealand, it's developed in different ways. I mean, in the Netherlands, it's much more around family group conferencing and the development there, and they've got some best practice there.
And of course, they have circles in the States.
Exactly, yes, and Canada, that again was one of the original bases for the development of victim offender mediation, and then developing further into restorative practices. So I think it's important that the work that we do is fed and influenced by what's gone on elsewhere in the world, and learn the lessons from what's gone on elsewhere in the world. And as I mentioned, we talked about complaints and grievances, and that work and that independent research has been done in the past.
So there's a new field as well, not a new field, but it is open for people to develop further.
Yes, yeah. And it's about keeping an eye on those, the key principles. And I think with restorative practices, it's around harm and relationships. Those two key principles. And what you're looking to do is ensure that you're not creating more harm by what you're doing, but also about developing, building, and on occasions, when necessary, repairing relationships as well. So if you've got that as the bedrock, then what you're doing around the standards is easier to develop.
Oops, I think we're getting called out. By the way, folks, we're here at the launch event of the Community of Restorative Researchers, so we're being called away to sit there and listen. And I think you're participating as well, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Well, that's great. That's the reason why we're being knocked on the door. So thank you very much for your contribution and very interesting words. Thank you.
Thank you very much.